This is a sad day for all of us Elvis fans. I can definitely remember how I felt the day that Elvis died. You know, it was, I was a little guy at the time. I was 7 years old. And I was a huge Elvis fan, even then. And I remember exactly where I was when I found out he passed away. I mean, I can tell you exactly the spot I was when I found out. You know, see what would happen was my parents knew that I was, you know, I would be extremely upset if I found out I was dead. And I was in the car, we were going to mall, stores and stuff like that. And every time they announced on the radio that Elvis had passed away, my family turned the radio down so I couldn't hear it. Unfortunately, at some point, they didn't turn it down at the right time. And I heard that he had passed away. Now this was in the early afternoon, you know, like 3 or 4 o'clock. You know, soon after he died, you know, they couldn't keep it from me too long. And I remember I just cried myself to sleep that night. The whole day I was crying when I found out. You know, because Elvis was always a big part of my life. And he always will be, you know. I remember just bawling my eyes all around. And I couldn't believe the man had passed away. You know, he was bigger than life. Elvis wasn't supposed to die. He was supposed to live on forever. But see, that's what it's all about, guys. He is supposed to live on forever. And later in life, that's when I find out that I was supposed to do something to make sure that he lived on forever. And when I came to Pow Talk, that's what I decided I was going to do. I was going to make sure that Elvis lived on forever, every single night, every day, every night, for the rest of my time here. And as long as I can, I will make sure that he is never forgotten. It is my goal to make sure that everybody that listens to this room, that everybody that comes in, who has family and friends, no matter their age, they will remember Elvis. In 100 years from now, we will know who Elvis Presley is. That is my goal, no matter what. Hi guys, I wanted to just kind of give you a couple quotes that I have in my head from a couple people through the years that said stuff on Elvis. I was a good friend of Elvis before he passed, and was a great talent himself. Made the quote, and this is what he said. He said, "Without Elvis, none of us could have made it." And that's true. And Elvis did meet Buddy Holly. You know, there's a lot of talk about Buddy Holly and did Elvis and him meet? You know, yes, they did meet. They did talk. Elvis did appreciate Buddy Holly's music, and he did respect him, and he thought he was a great singer. You know, James Brown, who was the epitome of the hardest working man in show business, who was a great entertainer in his own right, he said, and I quote, he taught white America how to get down. James Brown said that. And I don't know if you realize this, but Joe Cocker, I love Joe Cocker. He was at, he was a great performer. I don't know if you guys remember on Saturday Night Live, they used to do an impersonation of Joe Cocker. John Belushi used to do it. It was really funny. But Joe Cocker was at Woodstock, and he made his name there. And great performer himself. He said Elvis Presley was a symbol of the country's vitality, the rebelness, and its good humor. He respected Elvis a lot himself. And Janis Joplin said, "Elvis is my man." You know, there's a lot of things that these people said. And these are superstars in their own right. You know, these are superstars that make quotes about Elvis that I find is something you guys need to understand, that even to the stars, Elvis was a star. Elvis was bigger than the stars. He was bigger than life. Elvis was the man. He was the guy. They all respected him. And John Lennon, who of course is probably one of the biggest icons of all time in music, obviously from the Beatles. And, Elvis met the Beatles in 1965 in his house in California. And he was sitting there with the Beatles. And I've told this story before, but I think it's kind of funny. They were all sitting there, and they were in awe of Elvis, because Elvis was like the epitome of what they loved. He was the guy. He's what made them become the Beatles. He's what made them get into music. And, they were just like, looking at him like, oh my God, And they're sitting in his house, they're sitting on the couch, and Elvis came down from upstairs and sat with them. And it must have went on for like 30 or 40 minutes or something, as Elvis told her. And, John and Paul and Ringo, George, they're all looking at him. And Elvis at some point just got tired of it. He looks at him and he goes, guys, if you guys are going to stare at me all night, I'm going to go back upstairs. I thought we could jam or something and make some music together. And so the story goes, and it's true, at some point somebody turned on the recorder. Elvis was showing them how to play the guitar riff on a couple of the songs for them so they could play the songs that Elvis did. And they sat there and they sang a few songs together and had a good time. Shortly, they had a good time. And, so I was just going to tell you what John said. I went off on a tangent about the Beatles. I'm sorry. But that's a true story. It's a true story. They really respected Elvis. But John said this, and I've been asked this question many times by many people. Because the Beatles are highly important in music today. They were a huge influence on a lot of people. And people ask me all the time to say, you're a big Elvis fan, but who was more important to music today? The Beatles or Elvis? And, I always give the same answer. I said, without Elvis, there would have never been the Beatles, because it's what Elvis inspired the Beatles. So the answer has always got to be Elvis, because without Elvis, there wouldn't have been the Beatles. So it's a moot point. But John Lennon actually said about Elvis, he said, nothing affected me until Elvis. It says it all. Because without Elvis, John Lennon wasn't inspired. He wasn't inspired. All those great songs John wrote, all those great songs Paul wrote, all those great songs that were done by the Beatles. And don't get me wrong, the Beatles are a huge, huge influence on music. But without Elvis, they wouldn't have been here. So, I think you have got to say that Elvis was the most important person in music. Period. Hands down. Nobody else even ranks compared to him. Because Elvis inspired all of us to become musicians. Bruce Springsteen is a huge, icon in music as well. Bruce Springsteen was a huge Elvis fan. And he jumped the fence at Grayson, or the wall, as it is. Jumped the wall. He jumped the wall. He made his way all the way up to the door of Grayson. This was right before he really broke through and became who he was, Bruce Presley. He got all the way to the door, and the guys answered the door. And here's this little guy standing there. And they're like, who are you? He said, well, I don't know who you are, but that's great. He hadn't quite made it yet. And, but they weren't rude to him. Here's a guy who jumped a fence at his house, his private home. Got all the way to the door, knocked on the door. Can you imagine someone coming to your door and knocking on the door? And they answered the door, and Bruce was like, I want to see Elvis. I'm a huge fan. And Elvis wasn't there at the time, he was at concerts, you know, he was in concerts. And they said, man, sorry, but Elvis isn't here. But, you know what's crazy is, had Elvis been there, and I know how he is, Elvis would have probably invited him in, sat down with him, talked to him, and probably gave a lot of himself to Bruce. Unfortunately for him, Elvis wasn't home. But, you know, they didn't do nothing to him. You know, that's how Elvis was, and that's what Elvis told his people, never to disrespect his fans. Never, ever disrespect your fans. Because if it ain't for the fans, you wouldn't be here. The fans make you who you are. And Elvis knew that, and he made sure his people knew that. So even when people went over the line and did something they shouldn't have done, you know, or took pictures, or yelled his name, or, you know, when he was in a private moment in a restaurant or doing whatever he was doing, and they yelled and screamed, and maybe even, in a short way, disrespected him. Elvis never, ever disrespected him back. He always realized where he came from, who he was, and what made him what he was. And he knew how much talent he had, but the people didn't back him. People didn't buy him, so he wouldn't have been who he was. So he always respected his people. He always made sure that they were taken care of. You know, the President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, was a friend of Elvis's. He met Elvis. Elvis liked him. Elvis liked, of course, a lot of the presidents. Elvis never ever got into whether he was Republican or whether he was Democrat. Matter of fact, when asked what do you think about the president, Elvis said, I keep my political views to myself. You know, what I feel, I'm an entertainer. What I believe doesn't matter. I'm just here to entertain the people. He never ever let on what he believed in, you know, what president he liked. Because, you know what, to be honest with you, Elvis loved all presidents. Elvis respected the presidency. He respected the executive branch. Whether it was a Republican, he liked Nixon, he liked Jimmy Carter. There's a Republican, there's a Democrat. Now I'll have you know that early on Elvis was a Democrat, and later on he was a Republican. But he never let you know that. He respected the presidency. He respected his fans. He respected himself, and he respected his family. Paul McCartney said, and I'm going back to this, I'm trying to just give you kind of quotes and I'm going off and kind of telling you other stuff, but I'm kind of trying to keep it on the quotes. Now keep in mind, John Lennon had said what he said, you know, about nothing really affected him until Elvis. Now Paul McCartney said if it was Elvis who really got me hooked on beat music, when I heard Heartbreak Hotel, I thought to myself, this is it. So think about that. You got Paul McCartney listening to Heartbreak Hotel, and he's inspired to get into music. You got John Lennon listening to Elvis, and he's inspired to get into music. You got Bruce Springsteen, who's listening to Elvis, and he got into music. You got Buddy Holly, who's listening to Elvis, and he got into music. Heck, even Bing Crosby respected Elvis. You know, Pat Boone. I'm going to tell you a little story about Pat Boone. The first time Elvis met Pat Boone, Elvis loved Tom Jones, by the way. The first time that Elvis met Pat Boone, he was at a party, and he seen Pat Boone, and Elvis got all shy. Believe it or not, Elvis got shy at times. Elvis was a little shy. But Elvis seen Pat Boone, and he was real quiet, and Pat Boone told a story later on. He's like, the first time I met Elvis, I don't think he liked me. He didn't say nothing to me. I said hello, and he just kind of, and I said, I don't think he liked me. And I don't know, I don't think he was trying to be rude, but he came off kind of like he was scared or something. It was like, kind of, I don't know, rude in a way, but I don't know. And later on, Pat Boone and of course Elvis got to be a big star, and he met Pat Boone again. And this was, in his biggest days. And Pat Boone goes, I really respect you, Elvis, but I kind of got the impression you don't like me or something. And Elvis said, Pat, no, that wasn't nothing to do with that, man. You're Pat Boone. Man, the first time I met you, I was intimidated. You were a big star, and I was afraid. I was scared to talk to you, Pat. You gotta remember, Elvis was a young guy at one point, and Elvis looked up to these people. He looked up to Grand Ole Opry. He looked up to the country stars. He looked up to the people that were before him. See, Elvis never forgot that. Whether he was young or even when he was older, Elvis always remembered who he was. He remembered his roots. He remembered his family. He always was respectful of his elders, and that's what made Elvis who he was. But Elvis was intimidated by Pat Boone when he first met him. Because to him, Pat Boone was a huge star. Now, don't get me wrong, Pat Boone is a huge star. But Elvis Presley surpassed everybody. But to this day, if Elvis was to run into some of these people, if he was here today, he would still respect these people and what they brought to the music, what they brought to entertainment, and what they brought to the people. There's no doubt in my mind. Elvis was respectful at all times to all people. But with that, guys, I'm going to close up the room. I respect each and every one of you, and I'm so glad that you were here. And I just wanted to kind of throw that out there and kind of give you an idea of what we believe is the superstars today. To them, Elvis was a superstar, so you can only imagine what Elvis meant to the world, what Elvis meant to you, what Elvis meant to the stars, and what Elvis meant to the whole population of the planet. Actually, everybody in general. It don't matter what country you're in. It don't matter if you're in the UK. It don't matter if you're in the United States. It don't matter if you're in Canada. Elvis Presley will never be forgotten. Elvis Presley will always be an icon. And Elvis Presley will always be an influence on everything that goes on in this world. So with that, I want to say thank you to Elvis. God bless you. And remember you on this day. You will never, ever, ever be forgotten.